The eggs were good. Lily ate them with the focused attention she gave to most things she cared about, and Marcus drank his coffee standing at the counter, watching her. And for those 12 minutes the kitchen was exactly what it always was, warm, small, full of the sounds of morning and the smell of toast. Then Lily finished, put her fork down and looked at him. "Your phone keeps going," she said. "I know," he said. "Is something wrong?" He looked at her. She was 7 years old and she had been watching him navigate difficult things her entire life, and she had developed, in that time, a particular radar for the difference between something being wrong and something being complicated. She was asking him to sort it into one of those two categories so she knew how to feel. "Nothing is wrong," he said. "Something happened at work last night. People are talking about it." She considered this. "Did you do something good or something bad?" He almost smiled. "I said something true," he said, "and the room heard it." She seemed to accept this as a complete answer, which was one of the many things he loved about her. "Okay," she said, and went to put her plate in the sink. He picked up his phone. By 8:45 in the morning, the video had 312,000 views. The comments underneath it were a river, long, continuous, impossible to fully read. Most of them were simple. People writing what they had felt watching it. People tagging other people. People saying they had watched it more than once. Several people, he noticed, had reposted it with their own captions, and each repost had its own stream of responses beneath it. He scrolled for a few minutes and then stopped, because the scale of it was making something in his chest feel tight in a way he did not entirely know how to handle. He was a private man. He had been a private man by choice and by necessity, and the sensation of this many strangers looking at him, even warmly, even with kindness, was not entirely comfortable. He called Douglas back. Douglas had been at the restaurant since 7. He sounded alert and slightly overwhelmed and deeply invested, all at once. He said that the journalist messages in his inbox included 2 from local Chicago papers, 1 from a national outlet, and 1 from a freelance writer who had already identified Marcus by name. He had found it through the restaurant's website, and had sent a detailed request for an interview. "How did they get my name?" Marcus asked. "The restaurant tags me as your employer," Douglas said, "and apparently your name is on the website under the staff page, from when we updated it last year." Marcus pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose. "All right." "You do not have to talk to any of them," Douglas said immediately. "I want to be clear about that. This is your life and this is your story, and whatever you decide to do with it is your decision. I will support whatever that is." Marcus was quiet for a moment. He was standing in the kitchen. Lily had moved to the living room and he could hear the television, the particular sound of the Saturday morning program she watched, animated and cheerful. "One of the messages," Douglas said, "is from a woman. Her name is Laura Bentley. She says she is the director of a nonprofit called the Southside Community Preservation Initiative. She says she has been trying for several months to find someone willing to speak on the record about the development project on the Harlow Street corridor." Marcus went still. Douglas continued, carefully. "She says she watched the video this morning and recognized the address of the restaurant and looked up the staff page, and she would like to speak with you at your convenience. She says, and I am reading directly from her message, she says, I have been looking for someone who is not afraid to say what is true in a room that does not want to hear it. I think I just found him." Marcus stood in his kitchen with the phone pressed to his ear, and the sound of his daughter's program coming from the living room, and he looked at the morning light on the counter for a long moment. Harlow Street corridor. That was his street. That was the block with the green door. That was the community center where the staff knew Lily's name and had adjusted their programs in small, specific ways so that she could be included without being made to feel singled out. That was the building that Garrison Howell's development project had been treating, in a late-night dinner conversation, as a formality. He thought about the word formality. He had been carrying it since last night without fully knowing it. "Send me her information," Marcus said. "Already did," Douglas said. He hung up and opened the email. Laura Bentley's message was 3 paragraphs, direct, clear, and without the particular kind of flattery that people sometimes use when they want something. She described the initiative, a coalition of residents, community organizations, and local business owners who had been working to contest the development on the grounds that the community assessment had not been conducted properly, that key stakeholders had not been consulted, and that the environmental and social impact reports contained significant errors. She described the timeline. The permit hearing was in 22 days. She described what she needed: credible voices, people who lived there, people who were known. She did not say famous. She did not say viral. She was careful not to say either of those things, and Marcus noticed the care and respected it. He read the message twice. He put the phone down on the counter. He went to the living room. Lily was on the couch with her stuffed rabbit, watching the animated program with complete absorption. The morning was doing what it always did around her, organizing itself into something gentler than the rest of the week. He sat beside her. She leaned automatically into his side, the way she always did without looking away from the screen. He put his arm around her. He sat like that for a few minutes. He was thinking, but not urgently. He was thinking in the way he thought about most important things, slowly, from the center outward, letting each layer of the decision settle before looking at the next one. There were risks. Speaking on record about a development connected to one of the most powerful real estate figures in the city was not a small thing. He was a single father with a sick child and a job that he needed. He was not a person with the kind of safety net that makes public confrontation easy. He had stood up in a restaurant last night because he had been there and something had needed to be said, and that was one thing. This was something larger. This had more corners. But the green door was at the end of his street, and the assessment had been a formality. And Lily went there on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and the staff knew her name. He thought about what he had said to Douglas after he had stepped away from table 12. He had said, "I said what needed to be said, and I would say it again. So whatever comes of it, I can live with." He had meant it then. He thought about whether he meant it now, in a larger room with larger stakes, and he decided that the answer was the same. He kissed the top of Lily's head. "I have to make a call," he said. "I will be right back." "Okay," she said, entirely absorbed in the program. He went back to the kitchen. He dialed Laura Bentley's number. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was brisk and warm at the same time, the voice of someone who works hard and has been waiting for a call she was not sure was coming. "Mr. Webb," she said, "thank you for calling." "Call me Marcus," he said. "Marcus," she said, "I will not waste your time. Do you know what they are planning to put on the Harlow Street site?" "I know the broad outline," he said. "Tell me the specifics." She told him. She spoke for 8 minutes without stopping, and what she described was detailed and clear, and in several places, genuinely alarming. Not in the dramatic way that things are described when someone wants to alarm you, but in the factual way that things are alarming when the facts themselves are the problem. The assessment had been completed in 11 days, which was not enough time to properly survey a corridor of that size. The stakeholder consultation, on paper, had included representatives from the neighborhood, but those representatives had been contacted by mail, given a 3-day response window, and 2 of the 3 letters had been returned to sender. The environmental review had used population density data from 8 years ago, before 3 new schools and a housing development had changed the numbers significantly. "The community center, the one with the green door," she said, because she knew every building on the block was not technically protected under any current historic or community preservation ordinance. It was simply in the way. Marcus listened to all of this. He did not ask questions during it. He let her speak. When she was done, he said, "What do you need from me specifically?" "Your voice at the permit hearing," she said. "In person, on record, as a resident and as a parent. And if you are willing, testimony about the community center's role, the specific role, the people it serves, the things it does that no government report would think to count." "I can do that," Marcus said. A pause on her end. Small. The pause of someone who has been working toward a thing for a long time and was not entirely certain the thing would arrive. "Thank you," she said, and then, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes," he said. "Last night," she said, "when you said it, those 4 words, were you frightened?" Marcus thought about this honestly. "Not frightened," he said. "Aware. I was very aware of what it was going to cost and very aware that it needed to be said anyway." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That is exactly the kind of person I need." They arranged to meet the following Tuesday. He hung up. He stood in the kitchen. The morning light had shifted slightly, the way it did as the sun moved, and it was landing differently now, fuller, warmer. The coffee was cold. He did not drink it. He thought about Garrison Howell. He thought about the statement that had been released. He had seen it in a notification while scrolling the comments. A brief paragraph from Howell's communications firm describing the incident as a misunderstanding and reaffirming his deep respect for service workers and his commitment to the communities in which his company operated. The statement was clean and professional and meant exactly nothing, which was what these statements always meant. He thought about Philip's expression at the table. That small, uncomfortable thing in his eyes when Marcus had brought the coffee, the thing that was not quite acknowledgement but was close. He thought about Darnell, 19 years old, who had walked to the kitchen with broken glass in his hands and his face open with relief. He thought about Laura Bentley and the permit hearing in 22 days and the 3 letters sent to community representatives, 2 of which had come back to sender. Because sometimes the entire premise of a consultation is not to be heard, but to appear as though someone tried. He thought about 4 words, said quietly in a restaurant, that had somehow found their way into 300,000 phones by morning. He did not think of himself as brave. He had never thought of himself that way. Brave was a word that other people used about things they could not imagine themselves doing. And Marcus could only ever think in terms of what was necessary and what came next. What was necessary: show up for Lily, pay the bills, keep moving, say true things when true things needed to be said, stand in the spaces that needed someone to stand in them. What came next? Tuesday, Laura Bentley, the hearing, 22 days. He poured the cold coffee into the sink and made a fresh cup. The next 3 weeks moved the way weeks move when they contain things that matter, not slowly, but with a density that makes each day feel more substantial than the ones before. Marcus worked his new dinner shifts, which Douglas had formalized with a full-time contract and a corresponding change in his hourly rate. He served tables. He did his work with the same quiet professionalism he had always brought to it. He answered a small number of interview requests. 2 of them, specifically, after consulting with Laura, who had a journalist she trusted and believed could tell the story in a way that centered the community rather than the incident at the restaurant. He met the journalist, a woman named Nina Carroll, in a coffee shop on a Wednesday afternoon. She was direct and careful and asked questions that were better than he expected. She asked him not about the video, but about Lily, about the community center, about the specific programs, the art class on Monday afternoons, the reading group on Fridays, the staff member named Helen who had learned sign language from a video online, because one of the other kids in the program was hard of hearing, and Lily loved Helen, and Helen brought everyone together in a way that the space would not recover from losing easily. Marcus talked about all of it. He was not a man who found talking about his life easy, but he found that when the questions were good ones, the answers came. The article ran the following Saturday. It was not about the video. It was about the block. It was about the corridor. It was about 11 families who had been contacted by mail with a 3-day response window. It included a paragraph about Garrison Howell's development firm's track record in 3 other neighborhoods over the previous 4 years. Nina Carroll had done her research, and the research was not flattering, and it was documented. By the morning the article ran, Garrison Howell's PR firm had released a second statement. This one was longer. It spoke to the company's commitment to transparent community engagement and announced, without being asked, that the stakeholder consultation on the Harlow Street project would be extended and reopened. It did not use the word incorrect about the first process. It did not need to. The extension was the admission. Marcus read it at the kitchen table with his coffee. He texted Laura Bentley, "Have you seen this?" She replied within 30 seconds, "Yes, the hearing is still on. We are still going. This is a concession, not a solution." He texted back, "I know, see you Tuesday." He put his phone down. 22 days after the night at the restaurant, Marcus Webb stood at the front of a hearing room in a municipal building on the south side of Chicago. The room was smaller than he expected, and more crowded than the building probably intended. There were families he recognized from the neighborhood. There were people he had never met who had come because of the article, or the video, or both. There was Laura Bentley in the second row with a folder of documents that she had been building for 6 months. There was Nina Carroll in the back with a notebook. There was no sign of Garrison Howell. His company was represented by 2 attorneys in good suits who sat at a table to the left and took notes. Marcus stood at the podium. He had written some notes on a piece of paper, but he did not look at them. He looked at the room. He described the community center on Harlow Street. He described it the way he knew it, not in the language of economic impact assessments or zoning ordinances, but in the language of a father who has dropped his daughter off there on a Monday afternoon and seen her walk through the green door and come out 3 hours later with paint on her hands and something lit in her face. He described Helen, who had taught herself sign language because one of the kids needed it. He described the bulletin board that was always slightly too full of notices, and why it was too full because things kept happening there, things that mattered to people, things that the neighborhood would not easily replace. He talked for 7 minutes. The room was quiet in the way that rooms are quiet when they are listening rather than waiting. When he was done, he stepped back from the podium. Laura Bentley was looking at him from the second row. She gave him one small nod. He sat down. The hearing continued for another 2 hours. Other residents spoke. The attorneys for Howell's company presented revised timelines and updated assessments. The committee asked questions that were better, Marcus thought, than he had expected them to be. The decision was not made that day. These things never are. The committee announced a 60-day extension for additional community input, a formal review of the stakeholder consultation record, and a requirement for an updated environmental assessment using current population data. It was not a victory. It was a pause. But a pause, Laura Bentley explained to him afterward in the hallway outside the hearing room, was where the work happened. It was where communities could make their case properly, with enough time to be heard. "Is it enough?" Marcus asked. "It is enough to keep fighting," she said, "which is the only kind of enough there is." He walked out of the building and into the December cold. It had turned colder since November, a different kind of cold, drier and sharper, with the particular edge of a Chicago December that announces itself without apology. He pulled his collar up. He stood on the steps for a moment. His phone was in his pocket. He did not take it out. He did not check the notifications, which were still arriving in a low, steady stream from the video and the article and everything that had come after. He would look at them later, or he would not. They were real and they mattered, and they were also not the thing. The thing was the green door at the end of his street, still standing. The things that happened behind it, still happening. Helen and her sign language and the too full bulletin board and Lily, who had asked him this morning what he was going to say at the hearing. He had said the truth. She had looked at him with those serious morning eyes and said, "Okay, but say it nicely." He had smiled. He had told her he would try. He stood on the steps for another moment. The city was doing what it always did, running, moving, carrying its million separate lives forward without slowing down for any one of them. He was part of it. He had always been part of it, and tonight he would go back to the restaurant and serve dinner and refill the bread baskets and make sure every glass was at the right temperature and that every person in his room felt taken care of. He would do those things with the same care he had always done them. And on Monday, Lily would go to the community center with the green door, and Helen would be there, and the program would run, and the bulletin board would be too full, and that would be what mattered most. He started down the steps. He walked toward home. He walked the way he always walked, not hurrying, not drifting, covering ground efficiently, carrying what he carried without letting it pull him sideways. He walked like a man who knew exactly where he was going. And this time, he had a little more reason to believe he would get there.